What is going on, Gunfighters? Welcome to another episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Today I'm going to be talking about fitness for the gunfighter. And how I came up with this idea to give credit where credit is due. I myself, as I encourage you guys to be patrons, I am a patron of a few people on Patreon. 2, to be exact. 1 is Pastor Joe Fox, and 1 is Bear Independent. Bear recently did a call out. I forget if it was a Patreon only video or a public video, but he was talking about how the gun industry, there's this giant gap, and how people talk all about gear and widgets and things. And I'm summarizing what he said, but not about fitness. And I thought that's very true. I'm somebody. I can talk about fitness. God has blessed me to be a professional gunfighter most of my adult life and blessed me to be very physically fit. I can talk about this, and I think it should be talked about. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'll plug in the bio, then we'll get into the topic. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast Regional Rifle Champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Melito. Welcome to the podcast. Fitness for the gunfighter. I do think there's a big disconnect in the firearms world. We live in this culture where I think sometimes we're less American than we are Amazonian, meaning we just want to fix every problem with the click of a button, put it in our cart, and check out. And that's the end of what we need to do to be prepared, to be combat effective. But it's not. Yeah, you need a gun to be a gunfighter, but you don't need a gun to be a warrior. And that's so much more important. You could have the fanciest gun, the latest optic, and the best ammunition, and the cool Gucci Cerakote or whatever thing you want on there. If you don't have the heart of a warrior and training of a warrior, that's not what makes a warrior. Part of being a warrior is being physically fit, and I don't care what culture it is, I don't care what time period it is. I'm going to speak to what I know and what I know about U.S. Marines. They're known for being good warriors, good modern-day warriors. They're also known for being very physically fit. What military today, what military infantry force, fighting men, does not have some kind of physical standard? Right? They all do. Why? Because it's important. There's a reason for that. It goes hand in hand with it. You don't just get a gun and be a gunfighter. It requires some level of being able to use it. Training, and part of training is physical fitness. I know you may have this romantic idea in your head of High Noon, which is a great movie, by the way. High Noon, 2 men step out in the street, mano a mano. the clock strikes 12, and then they just draw. They smoke that skin wagon. I know that's a misquote from Tombstone. And they just stand there static and shoot one for one. Like, that's Hollywood. That's Hollywood. That's not real. I'd hate to burst your bubble, but that's not really how gunfighting happens. I'm sure that somewhere at some point in history, there has been a gunfight like that. There have been several gunfights where somebody was just sitting across from somebody playing cards and they just had enough and drew out a gun and shot the other person. But that's not generally how it goes down. I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. CQB, room clearing. It's pretty physically demanding. Especially when you talk about body armor. Should you have body armor? Yeah, I think you probably should, but you had better be able to move with it. You can't run up a flight of stairs now. You probably don't want to be running up a flight of stairs with body armor. Body armor sucks to wear, as somebody who's worn it a lot in his life. You're literally walking around carrying dead weight. It's uncomfortable, it's sweaty, it's heavy, it sucks. You can't move around dynamically without it. I'd say it's probably more of a liability than an asset. For like home defense, if somebody's breaking into your home, I doubt you're going to have the time to put on body armor. Again, I think you should have it, but you should have it after being physically fit. Going back to being a Marine, one of the quintessential things we learn as Marine grunts, as Marine infantrymen, I'm up, they see me, I'm down. You don't just walk up to somebody on a battlefield, right? This is not Napoleonic tactics where you stand in a line and march and fire in volleys. That's not how modern warfare is conducted. You literally, I know that CrossFit is kind of the new fad, and yes, I'm going to call it a fad. I've been working out long enough to see fads come and go. Taibo and the Mediterranean diet, the South Beach diet, whatever fads come and go, right? I'm going to call it a fad, but what's very similar to that that's been around a long time, I'm up, they see me, I'm down. Buddy rushes. You literally are sprinting, you drop down on the ground, call it a controlled fall, with a rifle and body armor, then you jump up to your feet and do it again, so you don't get shot. It's pretty standard infantry tactic. Can you do that now? Can you sprint and then drop to the ground and then get up and sprint again for, let's call it 100 yards, right? Can you do that without dying, and not literally dying, but without, wheezing and being able to then get a rifle and acquire a sight picture? Now, can you do that with an actual gun? Even if it's just a handgun. And I love competition shooting, if you listen to the bio. I've been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. But shooting competitions are designed to be fun, right? Because you have to go and pay for them. If they weren't fun and exciting, people wouldn't really do them. There is some dynamic movement in modern, I call it practical gunfighting sports. But not like a real gunfight. People wouldn't show up if I said you're going to run 5 miles and then do a ruck march all day, and then at the end you're going to have 30 seconds of a gunfight. But that's more akin to what you're actually going to run into in some kind of situation. Or in a police context, I'm going to set you on this perimeter. You're going to stand there and hold it in this body armor, hot and sweaty in the sun for 8 hours. And then at the end of 8 hours, I'm going to give you one opportunity for one shot. Nobody would show up for that kind of competition. Competition shooting is good and it's valuable, but realize it's also meant to be fun. So there are some limitations there. Look at, some people fancy themselves, I'm going to be a sniper. That's going to be my thing. So I'm just going to sit and wait and hide. Go talk to a Marine Corps sniper, who I don't pretend to be. I was a lot of things in the Marine Corps. Urban warfare instructor. I was not a sniper, and I don't pretend to be one. I did serve with them overseas. Go talk to a Marine Corps sniper and ask them how much shooting they do versus how much humping, which is what we call carrying a rucksack. You a lot of times hear it referred to as rucking, hiking. Ask them how much of that they do hour per hour versus shooting. Probably not going to be sniping from your lazy boy in front of a Netflix big screen TV, right? You have to get into position. A lot of times that means long, arduous treks in rough terrain with gear. A lot of gear. Go look at what a scout sniper has to carry. It's a lot of crap. And some of it's actual gear, and I think some of it actually is crap. Hopefully they have better kit now, but when I was in Iraq, we had the old Prick 19 radios. And if you were really cool, a cool guy, you got a Foxtrot radio, which was like half the size. It's still a giant thing, and that's just one piece of comm that like a sniper team would generally have to carry. Maybe they have better, lighter stuff now, but I still have to believe that Marine snipers do a lot of rucking, a lot of ruck marching, a lot of monotonous, nasty, being super hot, being super cold out in the elements, carrying heavy weight. Talk about being in armed conflicts. You want to talk about something that gets your heart rate up, and I don't care if you are not doing a giant amount of physical activity. If you've ever been in an armed conflict, your heart will be pounding. Unless you're some kind of, I don't know, mental thing where you're a psychopath or you just don't care. But you talk about an adrenaline surge, right? Auditory exclusion, slow motion timing. All of that stuff just pumped full of adrenaline and testosterone. Just ready to rip stuff apart. You deal with that a lot better if you're physically fit. If your heart and your lungs and everything else is not accustomed to pumping adrenaline and testosterone, you're not going to handle it as well as if you're accustomed to doing that because you do it. And guess what does that? Exercise. Exercise does that. And I'm not saying that you need to have six-pack abs. I'm not saying that you need to be an Olympic athlete. You know, the Army doesn't require you to be an Olympic athlete to be in the Army. Somebody that served in the Army has done many a PT test, right? It's not crazy strenuous. You pass an Army PT test, it's probably gonna, if you tout yourself as being an armed, prepared American, as being ready, modern Minuteman, any of that, probably being able to pass a basic Army PT test is going to be far more advantageous to you than buying the next cool optic or the next handgun of the 10th polymer striker-fired handgun that you own because it has a marginally better grip or a slightly lower bore axis. And you know I love all that stuff, right? You're listening to Gunfighter Life. I've been big into competition shooting. I'm all about ringing out that last 10th of a second from my draw. But let's be honest, if you're talking about real-world gunfighting, being physically fit is going to be far more important than the slight variation of this handgun versus that handgun, right? Unless you're talking a single-shot, flintlock handgun versus a Glock 19. If you already have a functional, serviceable handgun, rifle, shotgun, are you lacking in PT? Maybe the answer is no. Maybe you're a PT stud. In which case, I'd say rock on. That's awesome. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. Just like handgun shooting is a perishable skill. All shooting is a perishable skill, but handgun especially. So if you're not on it, you're probably losing it. It's the same with fitness. You're not just were fit in high school, right? You have to maintain fitness. It's not like riding a bike. You might know how to run, but running is a perishable skill. I ran this morning. It was cold. I didn't want to run. I've had a standing rule, except for Sabbath, where I rest for a long time, that if I work less than 12 hours a day, I work out twice a day. Do I feel like it? No. Most of the time, if I'm being honest, most of the time, I don't feel like working out. I still do it anyway. That's part of being a man. You don't do what you want to do. You do what's right, what's best, what's beneficial to do. You think that I would rather sit in front of a couch and watch Netflix and eat Oreos? I don't own any Oreos and I don't own a television. Why? Because they're not beneficial. Part of being a man and part of being a gunfighter, I think, should be being physically fit to some degree or another. I know that this broadcast may not be popular, it may not win me a bunch of patrons, right? That's fine. But if you need to hear it, be honest with yourself. It's going to make you more combat effective. The fact that you bought the next new polymer striker-fired handgun or some thermal sight, or the fact that you can run a couple of miles without keeling over and, huffing and puffing on the ground or bending over at the waist sucking air like a fish thrown up on a dock. Right? That's probably going to make you more combat effective. Going to a range is good. And again, the fundamentals, especially in handgun, are a perishable skill and they're good to master. And I totally encourage that. I would say the bulk of your practice should be on the fundamentals. Once you think you're too good for the fundamentals, that's generally when you start not being very good at all. In addition to that, you should do some dynamic movement, right? Just the drawing, moving to the right, moving to the left, facing to the right, facing to the left. Shooting a couple of rounds in one position and then sprinting to another position and shooting a couple of rounds. Because let's say you duplicated me, right? Made another one of me, same training and experience, same marksmanship ability. You said, you number one, you're going to get into a gunfight with you number two. But you number one, you have to stand in one place. You can't move. This is not the Matrix. You can't just bend backwards and dodge bullets. That's not how this works. You have to stand static. And me, number 2, you can go wherever you want. You give them both the same weapon. Who do you think is most likely going to win that gunfight? The guy that can move, right? Dynamic movement is part of fighting. All the gunfighting training I've ever had, you know what I've never been taught? Whether it's FBI or I believe the largest shooting school in the country or Marine Corps urban warfare instructor. You know what I was never taught? When you start getting shot at, just stand there. You'll be fine. Right? You got to move if you want to live. You say, I'd never run away from a fight. You don't have to run away from a fight. As Marines, we're taught to run to fights. We're taught to run towards gunfire. That's one of the very first things we learn about fighting, right? You bring it. You bring everything you have to the enemy. You go at them hard and fast. What's the mission of the Marine Corps Rifle Squad? To locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. Close with, go to. That indicates movement. We're trained to run towards gunfire. That's a hard habit to break. Even me today, sometimes when I hear something that's gunfire or I think is gunfire, my initial reaction is to go to it. Right? That requires movement. And if you're getting shot at, hopefully fast movement, right? So, if this interests you, I do a whole other podcast called Alpha Male Podcast. I've done whole episodes, several on fitness and nutrition and working out and things like that. But get started where you are. I don't know where that is for you. Maybe that's just literally walking around the block, and that's fine. A step in the right direction is still going in the right direction. Having a gym membership is good. If you've listened, you know that I live semi-nomadically. I go long stints out in the wilderness, and sometimes I'll work out in the wilderness and still stay in pretty good shape. You can do a lot with basic equipment. But if you have access to a gym, I'd submit you're probably spending more than $20 a month doing superfluous stuff you don't need. You could probably spend that on a gym. Gyms are good to have and nice to have. But again, start walking around the block, and then start running around the block. Cardio is important. As much as I don't like to do it, it's important, right? Also, you can do a lot with basic bodyweight exercises. Push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. Start there. Cost you nothing. Literally cost you nothing. You can go when you're not like 90 years old listening to this or a paraplegic, which those guys get a pass, right? You can probably go run around the block today and it's not going to cost you a dime. Also do some push-ups. Again, not going to cost you a dime. Do some sit-ups. If you're not looking to make excuses, I'm sure you can probably find somewhere where you can do pull-ups. But I'll give you a pass on that. Just start doing push-ups and running sit-ups. It costs you nothing. And if you're saying, I don't have time, if you've watched TV today, again, I don't even own a TV, but if you've watched TV today, then you had time. If you've been on social media today, you had time. You just prioritize something else over it. So let's be honest with ourselves. As much as I love guns, and the next hot, cool gun, as much as I like trying to wring out every bit of speed and accuracy and consistency from myself and a firearm, physical fitness is important. So let's not overlook it as a community. Again, a message I don't think will be super popular, but for those who know that they should be, hopefully it's a reminder. You're already doing it. It's an attaboy to good job. You're doing great. Keep it up. And you will likely hear this and just tune it out and go back to not exercising. That's fine. But if you're being honest, I think you'll concede that it is important for a warrior, for a gunfighter. Any good warrior throughout history, I bet what you don't think is, wow, they were lazy and out of shape. Transcends all that. Transcends guns. It transcends anything. Warrior. Be a warrior. I'll close with this. You should not worship the body. The body is a vessel. It's a tent. It's a temporary dwelling here on this earth. But you shouldn't abuse it either. It's a wonderful gift given to you by God. Your body is a temple of the living God. The Holy Spirit dwells in you. When your father gives you something, you should cherish it and respect it. How would you feel as a father if you gave your child something that was really, really good and they just treated it like crap and neglected it and didn't maintain it? Wouldn't really make you happy as a dad, right? Versus you give them something and they really cherish it and take care of it. Your Heavenly Father gave you a body. Think about that. Tactical tip, going to give you a few exercises that will benefit the gunfighter. I mentioned cardio, running, wind sprints. Number 2, pull-ups. And when you're done with your pull-ups, maintain your grip and hang there, especially on the tips of your fingers. Strong grip strength can really aid in the speed at which you can follow up shots with a handgun. It's important just in general as a man to have strong grip, but it can really show dividends in your fast handgun shooting. So hanging after the end of your pull-up sets. You've already gone to failure on your set. Hopefully you're pushing yourself to failure, and you're hanging there, growing in that grip strength. There's also another one. If you're going to the gym, the plates start wherever you are, 10 pounds, 25 pounds, 45 pounds. You take the plate, you're holding it on both ends, you're resting it. It should have a hole in the center of the plate. That's how you put it on the bar. You lift it straight up and look through the hole, kind of like it's a gun sight. You lift it straight up and look through it. If you're strong enough, you lift it straight up and hold it. Good reinforcement of those muscles that come in really, really handy for shooting, especially shooting standing. A good gunfighter exercise. And a good dynamic gunfighting drill I'm going to give you. And you can vary this, distances and all of that stuff and targets, right? This is not gospel. This is just a recommendation. And to keep it as simple, you can get a simple paper plate. Get 3 paper plates. Stick one up on a post. You can do this dry fire or live fire and put 2 on the ground. 7, 7, and 7. 7 yards back and 7 yards apart. Practice whether it's a rifle coming up from the ready or coming down depending on your ready position, getting a shot on target and sprinting to the next plate and turning back and shooting that target again, and then starting from the other direction. So left to right, right to left, shoot, sprint, shoot, shoot, sprint, shoot. Same thing with the handgun, draw, shoot, sprint, shoot. And if you want to add on to that, you can do shoot one, reload while you're running. Because if you don't have cover, the next best thing is movement. If it's in real life, right, and you just shot and you're out of ammo, you load your gun with an empty mag on one in the chamber, you shoot, the chamber locks back, you start running, reload it while you're running, the pistol's now reloaded, you stop and engage the target again. So again, you got 2 paper plates 7 yards apart, you're shooting at a paper plate, and you can do this dry fire, you don't have to do it live fire to save ammo. But shoot, make sure you're watching your front sight or your reticle, whatever your optic device is, make sure it's a good shot. If not, try and repeat the shot, because it's the hits that count. And then run to the next position while you're doing the reload, and then another shot. Anyway, tactical tips of the day. Your tactical verse of the day, might as well talk about the one we mentioned. Your tactical verse of the day from 1 Corinthians. That your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God. You are not your own. You were bought at a price. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.